Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Love Your Naked Ass. I'm Kimberly, your host. And today, rather than coming to you live with a solo episode, we're going to chat with the beautiful and illuminating Jillian Riddell. Her story is powerful, as you will soon hear. She chose to thrive in spite of her circumstances and used her story to inspire so many others. My hope is that your takeaway today is regardless of what life throws at you, the decisions you make and how you decide to show up can literally change the trajectory of your life in the most awe inspiring ways. But before we dig in, let me formally introduce her. Jillian is a former teen mom turned valedictorian and is currently a certified leading expert in trauma and emergency nursing. In addition to being a trauma nurse, she's also the podcast host of Life Without Secrets, where she dives deep and reveals the secrets, struggles, and strategies that people have used in real life to get to be where they are and who they're becoming. So, the first time we spoke, just so you know, we were on the phone for over 3 hours. Jillian has become a wonderful friend, and I can't wait to hug her in person. I think you're going to love her story just as much as I do. So, without further ado, meet Jillian. Hey, Jillian.
Hello. Thanks for having me on. That was so sweet of you. And honestly, I cannot wait to hug you either. I'm a huge hugger. If you know me and you see me, like expect a big hug. So I
I'm
can
looking forward to it too.
not
Absolutely.
wait.
I'm so happy that we
Yep.
met. So before we get into the meat and get into the nitty-gritty details of your story, I just love to start out with a mini get to know you rapid fire. So you game?
I'm game. Let's go.
All right. So are you a coffee or tea drinker?
Okay, so I have to say I'm both because do not wake up in the morning without my coffee. And I have an amazing husband, and he knows this about me. And so he literally wakes up, makes me coffee before I even wake up. He'll be like, "What time are you going to wake up tomorrow?" And he'll have it ready for me because he is like what person that like jumps out of bed and he's just ready to roll and get it going. And I'm like, I need quiet time for like 30 minutes. I literally sit in the dark with my coffee in the evenings, though, I find it more in the wintertime, honestly. I'm a tea person, so I like the sweet and spicy Good Earth, and I do the decaf because it's in the afternoon, and I love a good warm cup of tea in the afternoon.
Nice. I'm actually the same in the
Are
wintertime.
you?
Said that and I'm like, wow, I drink tea only in the winter. That's so funny.
Mhm. Yep.
That's so funny. All right. Are you a milk or dark chocolate fan?
Oh, totally dark chocolate. I'm like all the way, and I don't know how I lived without it. I remember being younger and liking milk chocolate and wondering how people eat that dark chocolate stuff. And then as I've gotten older, I'm like, "Ew, how do people eat this milk chocolate stuff?"
Right? Right?
Yeah.
I'm still trying to get my son, who's 14, to eat dark chocolate. Every time he sees it, he's like, it's just too better.
Yeah, it will come, it will come.
It will definitely, for sure. How about red or white wine?
Red. I am definitely a sucker for the red wine as opposed to the white, although on, like, a hot summer day, I'll definitely go for the chilled white.
Yeah, yeah. I actually was always a red wine drinker myself. And like
Mhm.
just recently, I've started experimenting with like Albarinos and different Sauvignon Blancs that I like.
Mm.
So I'm kind of liking the white lately. Probably
Ooh.
because also I had Invisaligns for a while and I was so afraid of staining that I
Okay.
had to switch to white.
I actually did the same thing, and it's how I actually got a little bit more into the white, so that's funny.
Yeah.
Actually, I take that back. When I was 21 and, like, "Oh, like, let me have a glass of wine," like, when you're kinda going through that stage, like, I'm gonna be that too. I couldn't do the reds, and then into that journey when I started actually going wine tasting and doing it for the experience, not to, like,
Yeah.
get a
Of
head
course.
change, you know?
Yes.
Then I was like, "You know what? I actually like the red better." So
Yeah. Me
it's
too.
been a journey.
Me too. And then when we finally visit, we'll have to go wine tasting.
I absolutely agree with this, and give each other lots of
Yeah.
hugs.
What's your favorite food of all time? Now, I know you're not typically a foodie, but everyone
I'm
has one
not,
thing they
right?
love, right? What's one thing that you love?
I mean, if I'm craving something, I honest to God, it's dark chocolate. Like,
Okay, let's
I
split our
do
best
love I
friend.
do love the dark chocolate.
All right, I'll give it to you. Uh,
Right?
yeah. What is your favorite form of exercise, or how do you stay active?
Hiking, 100%. It's not how I stay active, if I'm being honest. I do a combination of walking, running, and weights. I like to change it up. I don't like to do the same thing all the time, but hiking is my absolute favorite because it really just gives me that time to dive deep in me because it's a more of a lengthy thing, and, I usually like to hike where there's no surface so that I can just kinda be alone in my thoughts.
Very good. Yeah, I love to walk too. I hike, but I typically will wait till go out with someone else because I'm always a little leery to go in the middle of the woods without anybody just because there's been so many things that have happened around here lately.
Yes.
So
Mhm.
I live in the woods, so I usually take a 5 to 6 mile power walk on the regular. And so, yeah, so that's
I
kind of
love
what
that.
I love it. But boxing is my activity of choice these days.
I do have one of those in my garage, and I have used it. I wouldn't say I use it all the time, but there are those moments.
Your vacation destination that's on your bucket list.
Ooh, um somewhere that I really haven't been, I've been to different islands of Hawaii, but I
Mhm.
haven't been to Maui or Kauai, and so that is still on my bucket list. We actually just went to the Bahamas, which also was on our bucket list. If I had to say something before that, it would have been the Bahamas, but we literally just checked that off. So I think really something beachy for me is always a thing. So I think Maui and Kauai are gonna be next on my bucket list. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Favorite book?
How Are You Really by Jenna Kutcher. That one was one of my absolute favorites.
That just came out, so you snagged it quick, huh?
Yes. Yeah, it came out last June, and I had actually met her just before it had come out, and so she had given me a proof of her book,
Oh,
and
cool.
I really just fell in love with it right away. It was right up my alley, like, "How are you really?"
I
And
actually
that's
have a Kindle copy. I have not started
yes.
it.
Oh, you're gonna love it.
So I'm in the middle of another book, and I promised myself I wouldn't read more than 2 books at a time,
That is a good idea.
right? Because
Mhm.
sometimes I'll be in, like, 3 or 4, and then I'm like, "What did I read? Let me go back."
I do the same thing, so it's a good plan.
Yeah. Last question before we dig in deep. If you were a superhero, what superpower would you have and why?
Okay, so I think it would be can I have more than one? Like,
Sure.
okay, can it be all encompassing?
There's no limit.
I think it would be strength, speed, and love,
Okay.
and that would be because I would wanna take out evil in the world. Like, I always said if I had millions, millions of dollars, I would buy things that I think put evil in the world, like company or, like, things that aren't good for us, and I would just buy it just so I could take it down, right?
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. I like it. Like it. All right. So now that we've learned a little bit about the ins and outs of Jillian, let's dig into her story. So let's start with that because you have a very powerful story that starts at a fairly young age. So I want you to start from the beginning and we're just going to see how it unfolds.
Okay. So, I was raised in the Bay Area by a single mom. When I was born, I had 3 older brothers that lived with me, which was from a previous marriage of my mother's, and then I knew I had this other family, which was another 4 brothers and 1 sister, so if you're adding here, it's 7 brothers and 1 sister that I have. However, by the time I was at a tender age of 11, I was really angry. I was an angry child. I would lash out. I was very insecure with myself, trying to just figure out the world and what was going on around me. My dad, I saw him once a year, maybe. And in the beginning, he'd say he was going to show up and then didn't. So it was always a surprise when I got to see him because my mom stopped telling me when he was going to come. And I think that was partly the anger inside of me, and at 11, you start to have these feelings come up and you're really not sure where they're coming from or what to do with them. So my mom brought me into this counselor's office at that age and had to tell me, due to the counselor, that these people on my dad's side of the family didn't know I existed, that he had hid me as a secret my whole life, and which is why I only saw him maybe once a year.
So you found that out from your mother in a counseling session. She didn't even tell you
Mhm.
that before you got there?
No.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Okay.
And so, at that point, I was like, the 2 people that you're supposed to trust in this world, right, is your parents, like, you would hope.
Yeah.
And I had felt like, gosh, my life is a lie. I must not matter, and I didn't really know what to do with these feelings at that point either, right? I'm like, okay, now I know I'm a secret. But because I knew I was a secret, I got to start going with my dad. He was a truck driver. And so we'd go deliver cars all over the United States. We did commercial shoots for Toyota and Chevy because he would call the cars for them. And I got to go with him. And at that point, being like 12 now, all I wanted to do was be around my dad. So I was excited. I was like, yes, I get to see him more. I'm going to go on these commercial shoots. I thought it was so cool. And then his phone would ring and it was her. And I would sit in the passenger seat, afraid to chew my gum, because I didn't want to be the reason that his secret came out. And
That's a lot of
so,
pressure for a young kid.
yeah, well, and it's also, this is my normal now. I don't know any different. Right. And so I would be really quiet and I would, I'd go home and I'd talk all kinds of cool things like, oh, I got to go on this commercial shoot, but around me, I was questioning my worth and trying to figure out in situations if I mattered or not. And so by the time I got to high school, I, which, to your love your naked ass here, 12, at 11, 12, I was also made fun of. So I was called Chubby Cheeks. And when I look back at pictures, which by the way, I've hid all of those pictures. I don't even know where they are. I literally took them out of my mother's pictures because I was, you know, even at an older age, before I'd really been on my healing journey, I
Mhm.
literally removed them from her picture box because it really just terrified me. So I had started working out, like, when I was about 7th grade, and I started getting a lot more attention by the time I was a freshman in high school.
Okay.
And then I thought, "Oh, I can earn my love wherever I go," right? Because my dad seemed to love me, like, I was always such a good girl around him, and I have to earn my love wherever I go, and that's how I fit in. That's how I'm gonna be worthy. And so I would put myself in positions that weren't great for me. I actually ended up with I have an older son, and I ended up dating him my end of my freshman year, and really it was because when I look back at it, it was because he was kind of the dad of the group. So he was a few years older than me, and we would go partying together. At this point, my 3 older brothers that I talked about that on my mom's side were gone. They're at college, they're a lot older than me. And my mom, she was a single mom, she cleaned for a living, she worked so hard. She would wake up at, like, 2:30 in the morning and go to work, and so I was kind of on my own by the time this is all happening. And so she's doing what she can, what she knows. And so I am on my own, and this boyfriend I had I'd go to parties, and I literally would end up passed out on somebody's grass. And he would pick me up and take me home and put me in my bed, and it was like a dad, right? If you look at it, kind of weird, but that's the truth, right? And oftentimes we're looking for the things that we're lacking, and
Sure.
we'll find them in maybe not the best places, but we're gonna find them, whether, it's like a subconscious. So we start dating. I end up getting pregnant at 17, and that was rough. I was a senior in high school. I was terrified. And if I thought, okay, I didn't matter now, well, now I'm really not going to matter, right? Because now everybody doesn't think anything of me. Oh, I'm the girl that gets knocked up in high school. I even had a teacher that I was actually kind of close to. She actually was like, "Oh, darn, she had so much potential. Oh, she got pregnant. Oh, her life's over. Oh, she's just another statistic," right? And quite honestly, the statistics are terrible. And I mean, this is the hardest thing I've ever been through. So I can, no knocking on that because there's only about 2% of teen pregnancies that result in them graduating from college by the time they're 30, is what the
Wow.
statistics show. Yeah.
Yeah. I still
So
teachers should never say that to any student, but that's just
no,
personal.
no, no. And here's the thing though. It the world will try to dictate your life in a good way or a bad way. And if you don't believe in yourself or find that inner voice in you, I think that's probably the most important thing is finding that inner voice. You're going to have to believe in yourself. There's going to be people that doubt you. It could be the person that you love the most. And
Absolutely.
they could give you that doubt. And if you don't have that inner belief and inner lion in you, like they'll take you down.
Yeah.
And so at this point, I'm 17. People are coming up to me in high school like, "Are you really pregnant?" And I'm like, I'm terrified and I'm nervous, but I'm also trying to hold it together and I'm like smiling. I'm like, "Yeah, it is what it is." And at that point I had a choice, right? I could and people were like, "Oh, are you gonna take off a year of school?" Because at this point, I already knew I wanted to be a nurse. I had my senior year in high school, I had volunteered over 500 hours in a urgent care because I loved being there. I already knew what I wanted to do, and that part I am very grateful for, and part of me knowing what I wanted to do was because I put myself in places where I could learn if I wanted to do that, right? Like volunteer.
Do you think that piece helped you not become a statistic? I think you said that to me before, and I started
Mhm.
to think about it. Having a purpose and having a strong pulls towards something that could potentially be your future, I think that could have potentially helped you, right?
Absolutely. I think that having a direction.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of people that I see nowadays that they lack direction. And a lot of it is they're worried they're going to make the wrong choice, right? And so like, "Oh, I don't know if I want to pick a career because maybe I won't like it when I get there." And if I had to give advice on that, I would say pick something and run with it. Because no matter what, when you get there, if you don't end up loving it in the end, you have a long life to live and you can always do something else. You don't have to stay in that forever.
Yeah.
You can and whatever that choice was, you're going to grow from it in
Absolutely.
one way, shape or form. So it's never a loss. You're never losing. You're never stuck. If
And you gain
you just
skills
keep
that
moving along.
and you gain
Absolutely.
skills that you wouldn't have had before if you didn't do it. And listen, I agree with you. Staying stuck is not the answer because you go nowhere then.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so for me, it was like I had to make a choice. And to me, I was like, I'm moving. I don't know. I'm going to work as hard as I can and I'm going to move. And so I started college on a Monday and or no, I'm sorry. I had my son on a Monday and I was back in college the next Monday. So I started in August. He was born September 25th. So I was only a month into my first year of my college and I didn't even take a week off. I was doing online stuff even when I came home from the hospital after having him.
Wow.
And I was determined. There was nights, I mean, I would be up 48 hours in a row, and I didn't care because I was on a mission, and it wasn't just for me, it
Mhm.
was for my son, and I was going to prove that we can do hard things,
Yeah.
no matter what.
Where was the dad in the picture? Did he stay in the picture at all?
So, we are great friends now.
Great. Awesome.
Yeah, yeah, we had a lot of trials in the beginning. He had his own stories that he can tell, but no, we were just trying to figure this out, and we were both emotional roller coasters at that point.
Yeah.
And
Rightfully so. I mean, how can you help it?
yes, I think the difference between us and what kind of made us steer down different paths is I was very in tune with where I was going, and he was a little bit lost. Like,
Mhm.
he wasn't sure. He was very much Mr. Popular in high school,
Okay.
and by the time when he graduated, he really didn't know where to go. And for me, I had a direction, and that's why I say choose something and run. Dig as deep as you can into that thing that you're choosing to do and make the most of it. And when you get there, choose the next direction, you know? Yeah, so I think that was part of my success was just it wasn't an option.
Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't an option, and my purpose for doing it was so much greater than myself.
Oh,
And not only did I wanna be somebody, I wanted to matter, right? Because I was not gonna not matter because that's how I felt my entire childhood. So I was not gonna not do something, and so I think it's so important.
so you kept saying throughout your story that you always were looking for validation that you mattered.
Mhm.
And then you find yourself at 17 pregnant. Did you recognize right then that you mattered? Or
No.
no? Okay.
No.
Okay.
No. So, yeah, so I have this baby, I go through college, I graduate from college as valedictorian, I become a emergency room nurse, and in that emergency room was a place that I felt I mattered, and why I'm still, to be honest, very passionate about it is because in those moments, I literally have saved people's lives. Like, it's powerful, and I think in growing up, I've had to learn how to channel my fight or flight response because I felt very triggered as a little girl and the anger issues that I had. And for me, that was learning how I've dealt with it is learning how to process the fight or flight and really direct it into where I want it to go. And I think that's why I can be so successful in a trauma room or, things like that when seconds count. Because I have been there so many times that I have, instead of letting my triggers take control of me, I have learned to take those triggers and control them. And I use them for a purpose. So that in those moments, I mattered. And those were the moments, some of the greatest moments in my life where I did feel I mattered, almost like the only point in my life at that point in my young 20s.
Mhm.
And here's the thing though, I never took the time because I was always trying to prove myself
Yeah.
to let myself really sit in those feelings of unworthiness, of that I don't matter. And when we don't take the time, they will come out in all areas of your life.
1000%.
Yes. And so I met my husband when my son was 3. We got married when he was like 7. So what was that? 2014 we got married. We had been through our stuff being together for 4 years before we got married. We'd been through a lot, but we basically both came in our relationship with grief cases. And when you don't in relationships, when you don't empty those grief cases and really dive into them and unpack them and figure out, I'm going to put this trauma on this shelf and this is where we're going to leave this. And when the drawer becomes open, this is what we're going to do. There was none of that. We were very young when we met
Yeah.
and we had lived a lot of life. My husband had been married his high school sweetheart and divorced when I met him. So we had both been through a lot in such a young age, which is really why we bonded, kind of over our own traumas. But we didn't know what to do with it. So we did carry these feelings. His was more abandonment, and mine was a feeling of unworthiness. We really carried that in our relationship. And then every time it came up, instead of talking through it, because we didn't know what we needed, like we knew the feeling, but we didn't know what we needed. So we just throw it under the rug.
Mm.
And it finally came to a head about 2 years ago. And we were ready to just throw in the towel. We were like, this isn't working. I'm not happy. You're not happy. We were making mistakes that, weren't healthy for our relationship. And it wasn't until we went to trauma therapy and we really started digging deeper into what was really going on behind these arguments we were having that became a cycle.
Yeah.
And we had a dance. We had a cycle that we would continuously put ourselves in cycle. We had to really dive deep into what was going on behind it. And so all this stuff started coming up, the unworthiness, the I don't matter. And when you go to work all the time, and in his eyes, he's thinking, I'm providing for my family. Like, this is for you, right? I know that there's a lot of people that can relate to that, right? Males and females are
Yeah,
so different in how we see things, but it
absolutely.
wasn't right. But it wasn't just a superficial, like, oh, I want to spend more time with you. It literally hit a childhood trigger for me, which was why it was such a big deal and why I was just couldn't wait to run away from that feeling.
Mhm.
And so I really started diving deep into that. And if we don't really dive deep and be honest and speak our truth in what's really going on behind those feelings, we're never going to heal. We're
Yes.
never gonna fully connect with ourselves. And so I think in a world where we're so busy comparing our lives to everybody else's, because that's a lot of what social media has become, there's some awesome things about it too. But in reality, it's just like the magazine cover when we were growing up, but now right? But
Yeah,
now it's
yeah.
it's a constant in our face, and so I really feel for the people that have grown up with it now their entire life it's been around for, because I'm like,
You don't know
we're
any
not
different, but
you don't
it's much
y
harder. Our
yes.
Yeah, the upcoming generations are bombarded with so many more stories and just a lot of drama that we didn't have when we were younger. I mean, it's hard enough being a kid as it is and a teenager to beat, right?
Yes.
And then you add all the layers of social media and the internet and all of the things that we see our kids going through today. It's wow. I'm actually very happy I'm not a teen. I'm not a teen in this day
Yeah,
and age.
me too.
It's tough. It is tough.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's important for us to also lead the way in getting vulnerable,
Yes,
because they are gonna start looking out and reaching out for mentors when they're ready. And I don't think there's enough of them. I
I
don't
agree.
think there's enough mentors that are speaking the truth. Life is hard sometimes. It's not always rainbows, butterflies, and positive vibes only. Like this is real life, and real life is hard. And I think it's okay to have those feelings. Like, these are your real feelings. There was nothing I could say to myself that was going to just make those feelings disappear without really diving deep into the root of them. So sitting with them is okay for a minute. And then we put action to them. And then we choose the different thoughts. And that will make you go farther in life and will also make you connect with people, which is really what we're here to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think challenging your thoughts with everything is really an important step to move forward and continue the healing process because I believe in therapy. I believe in all kinds of counseling. I've been through it myself, but I think it takes you to a certain level and then you have to want to take that next step because nobody can solve the problem for you, right? And I think
Yep.
I've talked to a lot of women specifically that, well, I've been in therapy, it doesn't work. That's the commonality, right? They get to a point where it didn't help. And I'm like, well, okay, that person cannot change your life for you and cannot move the needle, change the trajectory, give you a different possible outcome. That has to come from within you. And that requires you to actually challenge where you think you're headed and what thoughts you're having,
100%. That's
right?
exactly it right there. Yep.
Yes.
I totally agree.
That's scary. I mean, that's scary. And I think that's why I wanted you to share your stories completely because you whether you still had those feelings of unworthiness as a young adult, you still have that powering drive and force within you to want to keep going forward. So, although you thought you were unworthy, you still had a piece of you that had that belief that it was there and you just needed to find it. I've heard your story a couple times now, and I feel like that's what kept you going. So, what was your big aha moment? When did you recognize? Was it in the trauma ER room? Was it another point in your life where you were like, damn, I'm worthy because I exist? Like, that's it.
I think it started when I got pregnant, honestly. I think that was the beginning of the journey because it they talk about mama bears. Like,
Yes.
it was like a light switch went off on my head. I swear to you, when I was like, "I'm doing this. I don't care what people say. I'm just gonna face it. I'm going to break through this wall."
Yes.
Because I really didn't have any other option.
Yeah.
And, sometimes and that's why I feel sometimes it takes us like a rock bottom, like a dark place to really bloom. And that's okay. Sometimes those are sometimes our greatest moments we learn and the greatest lessons of our lives. And so I think that right there in that moment when I made that decision that I was going to prove that teacher wrong,
Yeah.
that was my biggest motivation.
Mhm.
And then when you start believing in yourself and you take action to those beliefs, then it was like, okay, I aced this test. Now I got to go to the next one. Okay, I aced this one. Then it was, okay, I got straight A's this semester. I got to keep going. I proved to myself by doing the little steps and the little moments. And a lot of that was being very intentional
Yes.
about where I was going and what I was doing. So I planned my day out. It was breastfeed for 20 minutes, study for your test. I had they still have it today. It's called a breast friend. That thing,
Okay.
I'll just tell you what, that was a lifesaver for me. I literally would have him on this breast friend. It like wraps around you and straps around. And you can just literally stick your baby on there. And it was like a food tray attached to you. And then I would put my binder in front of him, because it's pretty big. I'd put my binder on there, and I would literally read every time I breastfed, and I would study every single time.
Yeah.
And thank God he
I
was the
totally had that when I had my son.
oh, it was the best thing, I highly recommend it. It also, like, wraps around you unlike the boppy, so it gives you, like, the best back support too.
Oh, it's nice.
Yes, so I that is probably my I didn't go anywhere with that thing. That was my emotional
So you were
life-saving
studying for
device.
your exams while you were breastfeeding, and when I was breastfeeding back in the day, I'm dating myself now in
Mhm.
as an day, I was writing my first book. So we didn't have that. If I would have
Yes,
known, I
I
would.
did, 'cause I he's a 2006 baby.
Okay, well, I didn't know about it. I should have.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was the best.
I didn't know about it. I'm
Yeah,
kind of like sitting here going, darn. No.
right? No, it was I mean, yeah, I was really grateful for that thing. I would walk around my house, studying with that thing. I did everything with that thing, and, when you have to figure it out, you will. You'll
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah. You
You'll
do
figure it out.
absolutely find ways to figure it out if it's meant to be. I just want to bring back a point that you brought up that I want to just push on a little bit, not with you, but just with our listeners.
Mhm.
Fact that you said something about the world will present you different scenarios, right? And there's always a lesson to be learned. And I'm not saying that there's a message that you're supposed to learn in life, right? And it helps with defining who you are and what your purpose is. And if you don't hear the nudges or the whispers, it's going to get louder. And when it gets louder, it tends to bring some pieces of drama and trauma because you're not hearing it, right?
Yep.
So whoever you believe in, let's just call the world right now, like they're going to say to you, well, she didn't hear that. So let me throw a brick in the window and see if she notices. And if that doesn't work, it's like, let me drive a car almost right into her and to see if she picks it up. And I just had this talk with someone last week about it. And I was like, listen, the message is presented to you in a number of ways. If you think back to all the things that happened to you in your life and you strip out the details, the underlying emotion and
Mhm.
the piece that you needed to actually face and deal with is the same.
100%.
Right? When
Yeah.
you figure that out, whether you're 17, 21, 30, it doesn't matter. Once you recognize that, it's almost it's the most freeing feeling because you're like, "Oh, wait a minute. Okay, this is my trigger, right?
Mhm. Yep.
Because of whatever, and I can pull it up in every situation or experience that I've had that typically wasn't positive. Let's be
Mhm.
clear.
Yeah.
And how I react to that now and how I show up in the face of that emotion, I can change it.
100%. Yep.
That's an eye opening, illuminating experience for, I know it was for me. And for anyone that I've worked with, it's like, wait a minute, I have the power to change something. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, basically what you've been doing that you didn't realize is you kept banging your head up against the same brick wall that looks different. Right? It's all
Yep.
the girls that say, I can't find a guy, I can't find a nice guy to marry or date or whoever, right? Everyone I date are douches, blah, 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 blah. And I'm always like, well, step back. You keep meeting the same people because you're still hitting your head against the same brick wall.
Yeah. And oftentimes we are a lot of what we attract.
Yeah.
When I learned that, I'll tell you, this is goes back to love your naked ass as well. So the first time I realized this was I talked about how I was called chubby cheeks and I'm going into high school and I'm all of a sudden getting all this more attention because I had worked out and I had looked better and I didn't have so much chubby cheeks anymore, right? And I thought to myself, the story I told myself at first was, "Oh, they just wanna talk to me because I now look good. So, now these people don't really like me for me. They like me because I look better on the outside." But
Yeah,
really, if you dive deeper into this, I felt better internally in myself because I had built up confidence in myself, and it comes out as an energy on the outside. And
absolutely.
so what I'm doing is I'm actually attracting people. I'm more approachable because I'm going out in the world as a more positive, more confident being. And so that's what I'm going to attract.
Of course. Now, the caveat there for you at that point, though, was the thoughts that you were still having were not in alignment with that energy, right? Because you had that energy and that's what was really happening, but you couldn't see it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that we can, I did. I was a more confident person in high school.
Yeah.
And I think that was helpful in the end. I
Mhm.
was also I wasn't somebody out there sleeping around either. Like, I was with my high school boyfriend for most of my high school, and I ended up being the one that gets pregnant. You
Mhm.
can't tell me that some of you weren't also having sex just because you didn't get pregnant.
Listen, it
Y
happens, absolutely. And it happens to some of the what the teachers would say, the smartest, brightest of the bunch. Even if listen, even if you use birth control, it can happen. So,
Yeah, well, I was.
yeah,
So,
right?
you know,
So,
stuff happens, and you know what, though? Something it happens for a reason, and I believe that because that gave me so much purpose in my life, and I do not believe I would be who I was today if that had not been me. That
yes.
if that did
Yes.
not happen to me.
And I think that's the precipice of the story. That's why I wanted you to share this because it's not any different than my story, except that we have absolutely different circumstances, right?
Right.
The details are different, but we've come to the same conclusion. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have met you if we wouldn't have been through our stories. So I
Yeah.
think there's some beautiful synchronicity to listening to other people's stories and where they've come from and where they are today and who they're becoming because it opens up the door for all these brand new relationships that you may or may not have ever had.
Right. I think it also gave me a gift of empathy, which is really nice to have in an emergency room because
Yes, it is.
everybody wants to be seen. Everybody wants to be heard. Everybody wants to be loved and to feel like they belong.
Yeah.
And I think a gift that I have been given through these circumstances I've been through is being able to just see somebody
Yeah.
and say, your feelings are real.
Mhm.
And I may not have been through the same things you have, but I see you and I feel with you. And I think a lot of people are struggling with loneliness. And if we can just stop pretending that our lives are perfect and just connect on that deeper level, that's where the growth happens.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Totally agree. So let's talk about what else you've done with this piece of your story because you've grown into not just, you're not just a trauma nurse anymore. You've started podcast and you're going to be a speaker shortly. So why don't you give me let's talk a little bit about that. So tell me about your podcast. I had the pleasure of being on it.
I know, I'm so excited. It's actually gonna air well, I don't know when this is airing, but it's gonna air this Wednesday, so I'm super excited. Yes. Okay, so being in the trauma room, I felt a sense of I matter, right?
Yeah.
But being in an emergency room, it's very fast paced. To be honest, I'm not sitting at their bedside, like diving deep and getting real.
Yeah.
Like I'm doing something that matters because I could literally save your life in those moments, but that's not where the change happens.
Yeah.
And what I see a lot in the ER, and more so, and it's kind of been tenfold in the last 10 years that I see this a lot. There's a lot of mental health crisis. The beds are always full in that department.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I'm doing anything for them. I don't like even working in those rooms because I don't feel like I'm helping at all. And there's a lot of people that are just stuck. And what we're doing in the ER is what I call putting a band-aid over their bullet hole.
Yeah.
There's no there's no change that's happening. And it's just like people, I'm just gonna say this. There's a big thing about how much big pharma has made, right? And people talk about it a lot lately, which I agree with. However, we're the ones making them the money. Like, the reason why they make so much money is because you're putting a band aid over your bullet hole because everybody wants a quick fix. They don't want
Yes.
to put in the work. They want a little pill that's going to make them happier or make their blood pressure lower
That
instead of
fixes them in some way. Yes.
exactly. And
Yes.
so really like they're not the ones to necessarily blame altogether here. Could they put more money into something that's more helpful in the world? Absolutely. I think that would be the next step for them
Yeah.
if I had any say in that.
Correct. I agree.
Yeah, but let's stop judging them and start looking at ourselves and who's the one making them all this money. We need to take care of ourselves. We need to be more responsible for our lives.
Mhm.
And we need to not let the world, again, dictate where our life is going. We need to take the responsibility and do the work. And so
And
for
that's
me,
the
oops,
caveat there that I just want to throw in there, which I know you agree with,
yeah,
is the fact that regardless, I want to say, regardless of your circumstances, like,
yes. Oh,
because
absolutely.
we're all handed a deck of cards and some
Yes.
look worse than the other. And I think that the fine line is some people have a deck of cards that's tenfold worse than somebody else's, but you still have that opportunity to challenge that and say, just because I've been given this deck of cards doesn't mean that I have to allow it to determine where I go next.
Yeah, absolutely. There's opportunity in anything.
Right.
And yeah, and sometimes just like in my story, I was not given anything. I had a very poor single mom who cleaned for a living. And then I get pregnant at 17. I could have gone and just said, I'm going to go work at McDonald's and pay my bills, right?
Yeah.
No, I took out loans. I went to school. In fact, I'm still paying them off. I have like 5 grand more. And I'm
Yeah.
okay with that
Yeah.
because and I'm just paying the minimum because I don't care, right? I could have paid it off a long time ago. I could have paid it off in a year if I wanted to. But I made the bet on myself.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to start doing. And so why did I do Life Without Secrets? Why did I start a podcast? I'd been looking for something that was going to bring more change to the world because I didn't want to keep putting band-aids over bullet holes. I wanted to really get to the core of why we're putting the band-aids over our bullet holes. Like, we need to get to the core of the problem. And that means diving deep and really getting real with how we really feel on the inside. Because if we don't fix that, the external is going to look just as messy.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so my whole passion and my whole purpose for developing this podcast was we're going to talk about real stuff. And it's not the podcast where I need to have every celebrity in the world on to tell their story. It's not that. This is about people because guess what? Everybody matters. And you can always learn somebody. You don't have to be some famous person to learn something from them. There's people in our everyday lives that we can be learning from every single day if we would just take the step and get vulnerable.
I think
Or
that one of the things you just said, I know there's people out there that literally listen to the celebrity stories and they learn from that. And I'm not one of them. I don't have that mentality. I don't know why. I think they put their pants on the same night we do, right? And sometimes you relate more to someone who's more in line with where you are in life. And I'm not a celebrity. So I
yeah.
can't relate to living in that lifestyle and being in the limelight in that way. Don't get me wrong. I like to hear stories and I've listened to many of them, but I think some of the most powerful stories that I've really taken away and learned from are people just like me, are people that I would walk into the grocery store and walk right into them. Right. And I think that's just something that there's a lot of people out there that you can learn a lot from just hearing anyone's story.
Yeah. I think for me, it's more like wherever you're at in your journey, connection is key.
Mhm.
And so, like, first connect with yourself, figure out what's going on in there. Or maybe the people that have, like myself, started doing that deeper work. That gives me an opportunity to be vulnerable with other people, and that might bring out something in them.
Yes.
And so I think no matter if you're a celebrity or you're just getting started, you're a teenager, whatever it is in your life, start connecting with the people around you on a deeper level,
Yes.
and I think there's, like, the people that you relate to. I like to have every kind of person in my life, and it's just really about the connection that it brings because connection teaches us something and it makes us feel worthy. It makes us feel like we matter because we got to connect. We got to get vulnerable. We're not alone anymore in what we're going through. And that's really what everybody's looking for. We don't wanna feel alone. We don't wanna be alone in what we're going through. We wanna feel worthy, and if she can feel worthy and she's been through that, so can I.
Yeah. 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 Mm. I do feel that I come from a slightly different space in on this angle, just because part of my healing process before I was able to really share my story with the world was that I had to be okay being alone with my thoughts. And I needed to sit with them and learn how to not only love myself being alone, but being whatever my version of happy is, right? Like being content, being 'cause that's an inward job. That's an inside job. No one else can do that for you. So I've often worked with women who they don't know how to be alone for even 5 minutes. So if they're in their house, they have to have the TV on, the music playing, they have to have some noise in the home. And sometimes the challenge for them is simply turn the TV off, turn the music off, sit with yourself. Because at the end of the day, you need to be comfortable and confident in who you are in that moment right there.
Yep,
Because that's when you start to blossom into this beautiful being that has more empathy, that has a deeper understanding, that has more forgiveness for the world and for themselves. And then you kind of peel back the layers, and then those pieces of your story don't feel so shameful or hurtful or whatever word you want to use. And when you tell someone your story, it's not because you want them to know about this piece of your life, at least not in my situation. And I know it's not the same for you. It's about sharing it for what you just said. So people don't feel alone,
mhm. It's an
which is what,
invitation. It's an
yes,
invitation for them to embark on their own journey, like,
yes,
to sit with their own stuff.
yes.
Yeah, because I do. I think that when you really sit in the quiet away from the noise of the world and you really dive deep into your own feelings, like that's where the magic happens. That's where the your purpose of your life blooms.
And when you actually get to a point where you enjoy those moments,
Mhm.
it's almost, I don't want to say you've arrived because that's not the right word, but it kind of feels like it. It kind of feels like, wow, I've done all this work and this is a great place to be in. Now, what is my next step to help change the world? Because you can't really impact anyone effectively. This is my opinion, of course, if you haven't been able to dig into your own stuff,
Absolutely. I
right?
think I think also you can understand more people. Like sometimes people are like, "Do you still talk to your dad? Like he hid you for 18 years of your life?" So by the time he told his family about me, I was 18 and having a baby. And people question that and I'm like, there was times when when I first had my son, I was like, I found out how much love I had for him, and I could not understand. I could not understand how somebody did that to me when I loved this human being so much I would do anything for them. However, through my healing journey, and when you dive into those deep feelings, I think you can start understanding the world around you better and why people do the things that they do, which allows forgiveness as well in our lives.
Yeah. I'm sure when you first you had to have been angry in the beginning. There's no
Yeah.
way. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just human nature, right?
Exactly, but in my healing journey, when I started really diving deep into the things that I've done and the mistakes I've made, and you start understanding like, wow, I wonder what his journey looked like growing up,
Yeah.
and you can start kind of understanding people and the things that they've done and not judging them for it. And that's how we be more approachable too. That's how we can be a light in a dark situation and as there as a person who is willing to take the time to understand and sit with them,
Yeah.
even if because we all make mistakes. Nobody's
I was just
perfect.
gonna say,
Yeah.
I think as kids, we sometimes forget that our parents are human. We don't think about it because it's not in our mindset at that point. It's when you get older, you start to recognize, oh wow, they have their own story, right? They have their own journey that they've been embarking on from their own stuff that they've gone through throughout their lifetime. And it absolutely unequivocally makes you look at your parents in a much different way. And I can say that wholeheartedly for myself. I used to be a little bit harder on my mom. And then I learned her story, and it was beautiful to unfold and unravel. Okay, I get it. And it makes sense from how she acts sometimes and how I get what I get from her. And it's just a fascinating unraveling of stories.
Yeah.
But when you're a little kid, you're like, parents don't make mistakes, or at least I don't.
Yeah, well, they're your example, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now,
Yeah.
as a parent, I constantly tell my son, hey, listen, I don't do everything right. I'm going to mess up. This is just how it's going to be.
Yeah, I'm super honest with that as well. Like, what I forget what my daughter said the other day. What did she say? I'll yell or something, and then I'm like, "You know what? I'm sorry. Mommy has to work on her emotions too, and having to process it and not be triggered and try to respond instead of react." And I go over this whole thing, and then like she'll like yell at her brother or something. Well, I'm just trying to figure out my emotions, mom, just like you. I'm like, okay, yeah,
No,
okay,
I get it. Hey, listen, we are human. And,
yep,
you know,
exactly.
I still to this day have to work on that because if I have to tell my son to do things 4 or 5 times, I get loud. I do.
Yeah, I get it.
Don't. And I often walk away going, "Oh, what could I have done differently?"
And you know what? That's the beauty in it. And that's where you've done the work because you're more aware and you do ask yourself those questions. What could I do differently next time that could make that better? I mean, life is about learning.
Yeah, absolutely. And it
Yeah.
never stops. It never stops.
No, it
If
never
you stop
stops.
learning, then I feel like life sort of stands still and it's not as exciting. I mean, learning doesn't necessarily always have to be coming from such a dramatic place. It can come from anywhere. It can come from the beauty of something. But if you turn off and you stop learning, then life gets real stale real fast.
I agree.
So tell me about your speaking engagement that's coming up.
I'm so excited. So I am in Amberly Lago's mastermind actually. It's called Unstoppable Success. But there's gonna be people speaking like Catherine Gordon will be there, Amberly Lago, and it will be in North Carolina, in Raleigh. And I think you can go to the truegraceandgrit.com and you can get tickets there. There's really not very many. It's a awesome venue. It's the same venue that Ed Milet did his book launch at, which is
Okay.
how I met Jenna Kutcher, which is why I started the podcast. So for me, this is like a very cool moment for me because it's the same stage that Ed Milet was on for his book launch, which is why I met Jenna Kutcher, which is why I started my podcast because she
Such a
really
full circle moment here.
it is a full circle moment, and then it's the same stage that I'm going to be speaking at, which is wild to me, and if this is to me a God moment, maybe it's a universe moment for you, but it's wild. So I'm super excited. It's gonna be March 10th and 11th,
Okay.
and so, yeah, please come join me. That would be so fun. I love to meet people in person and give them a hug, and that's the best part of this world.
I'm very excited for you, and I'm anxious to see what that opens for you moving forward. So,
I am too. Yeah. I eventually would love to write a book. I'm just kind of putting it out in the universe and I'm not going to say when or anything, but my number one thing is I want to embrace the moments I'm in and I want to enjoy the journey.
yeah. Yeah.
Cuz if we miss that part, we miss the whole thing.
I think when I finally learned that life is not about starting at point A and landing at point Z, and that it's always a journey, and that my journey looks like this.
Mhm. Me too.
It's like a zigzag circle all around, back, forth, and all. It's never a linear line for me. That's part of the process. It became a lot more enjoyable, right?
100%.
When you're not constantly trying to push something into existence or having this expectation that when I get to this point, I'll have this. I
Yep.
stopped doing, and that's totally changed the way I look at my life, totally changed the way I develop goals. And I tend to be a little bit more loose in what I'm expecting from something. So
Mhm.
I keep I keep it open almost in a fluid way. Yes, I take action and yes, I go forward with my goals, but I leave some room for beauty to come in that I haven't seen yet or that I'm unaware of. Because when
Yes.
I've done that in the past, some of the most amazing experiences have come from that. And it was because I was available to actually let it in versus, nope, I'm here. I got to go to and see, and that's it. I
Yeah.
have a type A personality. So that was hard for me. That was really hard for me to recognize that and change it. But again, just like we've been talking about throughout this entire podcast, you have the ability to shift that. That one piece, that one mindset shift can literally change everything for you. So,
Well, yeah, and I think that, with the whole instant gratification thing too, like, people think they're gonna just, like, overnight become this person or do this thing or accomplish this goal, and you really have to find beauty in the process because, I mean, it took me 6 years to get my bachelor's in science and nursing,
yeah.
and I could have done it faster, but then I probably wouldn't have gotten the grades I got, and when I applied to nursing schools, I got into 9 out of the 10 I applied for, and I applied for 10 because I was not losing, I was getting into one of them, and so, like, I mean, and it's just like this journey for me. I don't expect this to be like an overnight success. I'm going to enjoy this journey and wherever it takes me, it's going to be beautiful. And so if we can just understand that just because you didn't get 10,000 downloads this week or 100,000 downloads, that doesn't mean you're not winning. Like celebrate the wins. It's enjoy the journey, see the beauty in what you have in front of you. Not just where the destination is.
Correct. Correct. My philosophy has been And it hasn't always been this way. I mean, I had a business in the past and I was burning the candle from every end and I was working like a crazy person. And I finally gave it up because of that. And it was the best decision I ever made because I wasn't really living in alignment with where I wanted to go. And it was affecting my relationships and me being a mother and all of the things.
Mhm.
This time around, I have made a pact with myself that I have a shutdown time, I have a weekend off time, and I don't care if it's do I make concessions when I have some? Yes, I absolutely do. There's some wiggle room there, but my family will always come first. And then my business comes second. And but I put my whole heart into that. So that's not a I don't work hard and that's not true. But I do everything with the intention of if I just impact one person today, then I've
Yes.
won.
That's exactly
Instead
right.
of, I want to impact the world. I've
Exactly.
decided that I am going to impact the world one woman at a time. So that's my philosophy. And that makes me keep going. And that drives me every day. And just getting to talk to people like you. If one person listens to your story and says, well, if she can do it, then I can do it, then we just won.
That's exactly right, and that's exactly how I see it too. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And I'm a huge fan of collaboration over competition. And so, anyway, we can share each other's successes and share each other's journeys and work. I'm all about that. So, with that said, how can people find out more about you?
Well, I have my Instagram is actually Life Without Secrets podcast is my handle. I did have a Jillian Riddell one, but I was one of those like 500,000 people that got disabled on Instagram at the end of October. So
I still
I
can't
have,
believe that
I
happened.
know, I can't believe that happened too. And it was right before I launched my podcast. So things will happen to you to push you down and don't let them. You better get back up and keep going. That's my
Right.
message there. Um, so yes, follow me at Life Without Secrets podcast. I'm on Facebook, Jill Riddell. I'm trying to get more about into like LinkedIn and TikTok and all that. Maybe.
Well,
I'm working on it.
I'm platform at a time, right?
I'm enjoying the journey. I'm working on a website right now. It's not finished, but it'll probably be lifewithoutsecrets.com. I already had bought in the domain and everything. So you can find me on there. But yeah, let's connect. Message me on Instagram. I would love to hear from people. Just like I love connection. So would love to hear thoughts, all that.
Cool. So I have a Facebook group. It's called the Love Your Naked Ass Society. And eventually, when this podcast episode actually goes live, we're going to do a Q&A on it. So I'll invite you to
Oh,
participate.
I'd love that.
And we'll invite people to come talk to us about just their journey, if they can share any experiences that may or may not be similar, and just kind of pour ourselves a glass of wine or a cup of tea, whatever your thing is. And we can jam out for a little bit with people. I think I started this podcast because I really wanted to create a way to form connections with the outside world too. And part of that journey for me is this extra layer, this extra piece. Once it starts to open up a little bit, I'm going to do some Q&As and invite the guests to participate. So I think it'll be a lot of fun.
It's going to be amazing. And I cannot wait to join you. That'll be exciting. I am all game for that.
So, all right, Jillian, it was great to have you on this podcast today. Thank you so much for being my guest. I hope you guys learned how powerful one person's story and seeing that person just really rise from what we would maybe look at as like that adverse that could tear us down and keep us at the bottom and watch her rise to bloom into this beautiful human being who has all these things to offer the world and she's made it work. You can too. So I will catch you guys next week. In the meantime, I will drop all of her things in the show notes and you guys can connect. And again, thank you so much for being here. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Kimberly.